This is a review for your Chapter 32 test. As you can see here, I've given you some English and Latin vocabulary. You may want to become familiar with both groups of words here. I will go through a few of them, and we'll move on from there. Component is it's part of a whole. You have a component as a piece of the puzzle. Conducive means that it's something that leads to something, a factor which leads to something. If it's conducive, then something is in a good state for something else to happen. Conversion, that is whenever you usually associate with religion, when you go from one religion to another. Anytime that you change from one thing to another, it is called a conversion. Effusive is unrestrained in emotional expression. So somebody who is very demonstrative, somebody who wears their feelings on their sleeves. Equity is a condition of being just, impartial, fair. I would say that equity is pretty much just balance. Adversity. Adversity is a great hardship or misfortune. You go through adversity, it's supposed to make you a better person because you go through those hardships, you become better adept. Appeal is something which calls someone to something. Avers to claim positively. Aviation is associated with aircraft, flying. Casualty is something that happens as a result of a grave misfortune, a death, usually caused by an accident, or warfare is where we usually use it in terms of war. Next we have laborious. That is something that requires hard work. Liberty is, of course, freedom. Oppressive is something that is harsh, crushes your spirit, crushes you emotionally. Otiose is useless or futile. Scissors, well, if you don't know what scissors are, those are things that you cut your paper with. Rescind comes from our Latin word scindo, which means to cut, and to rescind something is to take it back, usually associated with legal terms. Inequality is unequal. Executor, that comes from our sequitur, which also means to cut. So we have somebody who cuts off your head as an executor. Verification is something that you use to show that something is true. You verify it. So those are English vocab words. Make sure that you look into those and make sure that you're able to answer whatever questions they may ask about those. Latin vocab. We have aequus. Aequus is equal. It also means like emotionally equal, so stable. Falsus is false, of course. Occupatus is busy. Promotus is emotionally moved. Servitus is slavery. Otiosis is leisure. Virus is true. Libertas is freedom. Identitum is again and again. Labor is work. Quia is since or because. Res adversus is the thing that causes something. Adiuo is to help. Opus is work. Subvenio is to help. Causus is a cause. Quod is because. Iterum atque iterum is again and again. Aequus, I already put on there once, but that's okay. It's even, equal. Efundo is to pour. Scindo is to cut. And secutus is to follow. Next up, there's going to be a section on there that's requiring you to look at Latin abbreviations and turn them into English uses. Latin abbreviations that you're responsible for are AD, AM, ETC, PS, Protem, C, IBID, Nonsec, NB, and PM. Don't worry, because I have the definitions for those. AD is Anno Domini. That is basically after the year of the Lord, so after the death of Christ. AM is anti-meridian. That is before midday, so in the morning. etc is etc and others. So when I use etc, I'm saying etc, etc. I'm saying, and there are other examples. PS is postscriptum. That is, PS is something you use after something has been written, so postscriptum, after being written. Pro tem is pro tempore, for the time or for the moment. So if you have a president pro temp, you have someone who is the president for that time until something else happens. C dot is associated with time. So if it's circa 1900, we're talking C dot 1900 or around 1900. IBID is abitum. If I say abitum, I mean that something is in the same place. This is ibi and idem, so there is the same, so in the same place. I have non-sec, which means non-sequitur, or it does not follow. This is associated usually with arguments. If you make an argument that does not have any logic, it is non-sequitur, or it does not follow. So a bad argument or logical fallacy is non-sequitur. NB is nota bene. That means note well. Usually if somebody puts NB, they mean you better pay attention. This is very, very important. PM is post-meridian or after midday or afternoon. For this section, they're going to give you English sentences with blanks, and you're going to have to decide which one of these abbreviation goes in that sentence. So if I said, that the president was assassinated, and so the vice president is now the president pro tempore, you would know that that is the president for the time. If I told you that I was born circa 1970, then you know I was born around 1970, etc., etc. That's a joke. Next, I have some grammar terms for you. Dative of agent, cum clause, present active participle, perfect passive participle, indirect question, future active participle, ablative of means, future passive participle, and ablative absolute. These aren't new to us. We've seen these, all of these we've seen on previous tests, but they're going to stick with some of these on these questions. So a dative of agent, here you see mihi dominus tandus est, I must avoid my master. The dative of agent is the doer of the action used in the dative. Normally when we have a passive voice, we use the ablative, the ob plus whatever is doing the action. But for this specific construction, also known as the passive periphrastic, we will use a dative of agent to establish the doer of that action. The gerundive here, vitandus, comes from vito. You see the gerundive because of the nd, and we know that the gerundive normally gives us some sort of obligation. That's why we get must avoid here. Here is a participle chart to help refresh your memory. Remember, we have a present active participle that comes from the present stem, ends in ns or in tis. We translate that as ing. We do not have a present passive participle. Present active participles, we are perfect active participles. We have those now. They're the deponents. So adeptus, for example, would be a perfect active participle. Secutus would be a perfect active participle. We haven't had a perfect active yet, but with these deponents we're now adding those. Fourth principal part for the perfect passive, that's translated as ed. Future active is urus, and that is about to be translated. And then you have the future passive participle, also known as the gerundive, and that is typically translated as must be. Finally, I have here ablative use. We have means, manner, time, and absolute. Those are the ones that we've really been focusing on. Ablative of means tells me with what something was accomplished. If, for example, in this sentence I have his verbus promotus est, he is moved by these words. So that's what is causing them to be moved. So that's why it's an ablative of means. Ablative of manner tells me in what manner something is done. In this case, gloria circumspectavit, he looked around with glory, and that's how he looked around. Time, media nocte, we should be used to those by now. Time, a specific time in the middle of the night, is ablative. Ablative absolute, like this one, signo dato advenit. In this case, we have signo and dato both in the dative. Signo is the subject, dato is the passive form. So we have the sign having been given, or after the sign was given, he arrived. Next is our favorite, the cultural questions. What was the Stoics' belief in man's pursuit? Well, they believed that man should pursue virtue more than he should pursue anything else. Who was the most prominent Stoic philosopher? That would be Epictetus. What were feriae? Those were festivals. What form of rule did the Stoics support? The Republic, of course. They did not believe that one man should have all the power. Where did the Senate meet other than the Curia? The Curia, of course, is the Senate House, but they also would meet in various temples. What distinguished Judaism from Christianity in the eyes of the Romans? Well, at first, nothing. They really weren't able to distinguish the two. They both came from the same area. They both had one God. In what year did the Romans legally accept Christianity as a religion? That would be 313 AD. What is monotheism? That is a belief in one God. Why did many Roman soldiers follow Mithraism? That was because it had a lot to do with loyalty, and it had to do with justice. So that appealed to the soldiers. Also, it would appeal to them because of the discipline involved. In the worship of Mithras, they had to go through 7 grades of initiation, various tests. So it was very soldier-like. What emperor blamed the Romans for the 64 AD fire? Of course, that would be Nero. Who was Mithras? Liber, Bacchus, Isis, Terminus, and Venus. Well, these are all gods or goddesses. You need to know what they are goddess or god of. Mithras would have been the Persian god of truth and justice. Liber, Bacchus would have been the god of wine. Isis was the Egyptian goddess of life. Terminus was the god of boundaries. And Venus, of course, was the goddess of love. Another thing you're going to have to do on this test is, as you're going through the translation, they're going to give you highlighted words, and they're going to give you a word bank, and you're going to have to decide what the highlighted words are. There are a ton of choices in this word bank, but only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them are going to be used. So as I read through this, I want to be able to translate what I'm reading here, and then next to each one, I need to have one of these grammatical terms from the word bank. So translate this, and then decide what the highlighted word is. So give yourself some time to translate and come back, and I'll give you the translation. Here I have nam triclinio ad convivas delito. That is an ablative absolute for the dining room having been destroyed by the guest. The philosopher, philosophia ad Graeciam regressa. The philosopher having returned to Greece, another ablative absolute. In animo vivavat num haetheres se demisserus esset. He was wondering whether Haeterus was about to dismiss him. The demisserus is going to be our future active participle. The esset is a perfect passive, a pluperfect passive subjunctive, and it's being used here in an indirect question, the noun. That's what I was looking for, indirect question. Tibi ad urbum Athenis statum profescendum est. That is our passive periphrastic construction. So you must return to the city of Athens at once. Unde te nunquam redire volo. I want you never to return here. So tibi would be our dative of agent inside that passive periphrastic, and of course the profescendum is the gerundive of obligation, or our passive periphrastic. That's pretty much it. Hopefully this gets you started for your studying. Make sure that you go through all those words I gave you at the beginning. Make sure you're aware of all of the terms I left here in the word bank. There are going to be some other places within the test where you're going to have to know what a clause is, indirect command, indirect question, result, purpose clause. You're going to have to go through and pick out which sentence is which. It also is going to help you with some of the translations that are in there. Lastly, they're going to give you a picture. They're going to give you 3 choices of sentences, and you're going to have to pick the sentence that best describes the picture. All right, well, good luck.